The market was alive with noise, a place filled with fear, greed, and shadows. Cages lined the square, creatures of many races inside them, their eyes empty, their voices weak. The air smelled of smoke and sweat. The ground was dirty and stained. This was not a market of food or clothes. This was a market of lives. At the far end, under a broken light, a young alien girl stood on a wooden stage, her skin pale and glowing faintly, her clothes torn, her hair messy, her arms thin. She was not crying anymore. Her tears had already dried. She looked at the crowd with empty eyes. She had been standing there all day, waiting for someone to buy her, but no one had. The auctioneer shouted loudly, his voice rough like stone. "Look, at her strong bones, healthy heart, a rare kind, take her now, cheap price." But the crowd only laughed, some shook their heads, others turned away. "Too weak," someone said. "Useless," another voice added. The girl lowered her head, her small hands trembling. She knew what unsold meant, and it was worse than being sold. Around her, other cages opened and closed. Coins changed hands. Slaves were dragged away. Some screamed, some begged. No one listened. The noise filled the air, but around the girl, it was strangely quiet. She was invisible to them, forgotten before her life could even begin. In the corner of the market, a human janitor moved slowly. He was not part of the crowd, he was there only to clean the mess. His clothes were simple, his hands rough from work. He pushed his broom over the dirt, but his eyes kept lifting toward the stage. He had been watching the girl for hours. He saw how no one wanted her. He saw how the auctioneer's voice grew angrier. He saw how the girl's shoulders bent lower each time a buyer turned away. She was not a number to him, not an item. He saw her as a child standing in fear. The auctioneer slammed his stick on the floor. "Worthless," he growled. "No one wants this one, throw her back into the pits." His assistants began to move forward, ready to drag her away. The girl closed her eyes, her chest rising in quick, broken breaths. And then, a voice cut through the market, not loud but strong. "I will take her." The crowd turned, shocked, heads snapped toward the sound. It was the human janitor, standing with his broom still in hand. His voice, calm but firm, the laughter started almost at once, cruel and sharp. "The janitor wants a slave?" someone mocked. "He cannot even pay for his own shoes," another shouted. The auctioneer stared down at him, his lips curling. "You," he spat, "you are nothing here. You clean the dirt under our feet. You cannot afford her." The janitor did not move back. His eyes stayed on the girl. She was staring at him now. Her lips parted, her body shaking. She could not believe what she heard. In all her short life, no one had ever spoken for her. No one had said she was wanted. The auctioneer laughed and waved his hand. "Take him out, he wastes my time." But the janitor stepped forward slowly, each step echoing in the silence that followed, the broom still in his hand like a staff. His eyes filled not with fear but with something else, something dangerous in this place. Human dignity. The guard stopped for a moment, confused by the strange courage in his walk. The crowd leaned forward, curious now. Whispers began to rise. Why would a human risk this for her? Is he mad? What does he see in that girl? The girl's heart pounded, her legs weak. She wanted to believe this man, but she was afraid this was a cruel game, afraid hope would break her once more. The janitor spoke again, his voice steady. "She is not your property, she is not dirt, I will take her." The auctioneer's face darkened, anger twisting his features. He slammed his stick again. The sound rang out like thunder. The market went silent, every eye now locked on the strange scene. A worthless girl, a forgotten janitor, and a choice that could change everything. The girl's breath caught. She could not move, could not speak. In the middle of all the shadows and cruelty, a small light flickered, fragile but real. The moment held like the air before a storm. And deep in that silence, the crowd waited, no one knowing what would happen next, but feeling it. This was not just another sale, this was the start of something different, something dangerous, something unforgettable. The auctioneer froze for a moment, his stick still pressed against the wooden floor. The market held its breath. It was rare for anyone to interrupt a sale, but for a janitor, a human who had no wealth and no power, to speak with such boldness, it was almost unthinkable. The crowd broke into laughter again, harsh and cruel. Voices filled the air. "He is mad," one shouted. "A cleaner wants to buy." Another mocked. "With what? Dust from his broom." Their laughter rolled like thunder, and yet the janitor did not move. His eyes were fixed on the girl, her head still lowered, her small shoulders shaking. She could not look at him directly. She feared this was another cruel trick. She feared he would laugh with them in the next second. But his voice had not carried mockery. It had carried something else, something she had never heard before, belief. The auctioneer leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You insult my market," he said, his tone sharp as knives. "You have no money, no rank, and no claim. How dare you speak?" The janitor gripped his broom tighter, his hands rough and scarred from years of labor. His voice was steady, quiet, enough that the crowd had to lean closer, but strong enough to carry. "I will not leave her here," he said. "I will take her with me." The laughter turned to murmurs. Whispers rippled across the square. "Why does he care?" Someone muttered. "What is she to him?" Another asked. The noise of trade slowed, eyes drawn to the strange human who dared to stand against the rules. The auctioneer banged his stick again. The sharp crack echoed like a whip. "Then pay," he demanded. "Show me credits, show me gold, or get out." The janitor reached into his pocket, pulling out a small pouch. It did not clink with coins. Instead, it carried something plain, worn, and old. He placed it on the edge of the stage. It was a silver badge, scratched but polished with care, a badge of honor from a war-long past. The crowd gasped. The auctioneer's eyes widened for a moment before narrowing again. "A soldier's badge," he sneered, "and you give it away for this worthless child?" The janitor's eyes burned, his jaw tight. "It was never worthless," he said softly. "Neither is she." The girl raised her head slowly, her eyes wet, her lips trembling. She could not believe what she was hearing. Her fate was being debated like storm clouds above her, but for the first time, someone was not speaking of her as a thing, but as a person. The auctioneer smirked, cruel and mocking. "You dare to challenge me with such words," he said. "Very well, human. If you want her, then prove her worth, not with money, but with work." The crowd leaned forward, hungry for spectacle. "Yes, make him work," one shouted. "Let him crawl for her." Another laughed. The auctioneer raised his hand and pointed toward the wide, filthy arena floor stained with the remains of countless auctions. "Clean this place," he commanded. "Every corner, every step, before the sun sets. If you succeed, the girl is yours. If you fail, you both belong to us." Gasps rippled through the market. The challenge was cruel, impossible. The arena was wide and filthy beyond reason. It would take many men days to clean it. And yet the janitor only nodded once, his broom still firm in his hand. He stepped forward, rolling up his sleeves, his arms scarred and lined with years of hard labor. The crowd laughed louder, but a strange tension filled the air. No one had expected him to accept so quickly. No one had expected him to bend his pride into action. The girl's eyes widened, her breath shallow. She whispered softly, words that carried only to herself. Why would he do this? Her voice cracked, her heart a storm of fear and fragile hope. The janitor bent down, his broom moving across the floor, each sweep slow but strong, dust rising in thin clouds, sweat already dripping down his brow. The arena was wide, but he did not look at its size. He did not look at the laughing crowd. He only looked forward, one sweep at a time. The auctioneer smirked, certain the human would break. The crowd jeered, calling him a fool, mocking every stroke of the broom. But in their eyes there was something else too, a spark of curiosity, a question unspoken. What if he does it? Hours passed. The sun lowered. The market's noise grew softer. Buyers and sellers paused in their trade, watching the lone figure work. The girl pressed against the edge of the stage, her hands clenched tight, her heart pounding with each sweep. The janitor's back ached. His hands blistered. But he did not stop, his voice silent, but his will unbroken. Each stroke of the broom was not for dirt, but for dignity, for a promise he had made with nothing but his eyes. When at last the light of day grew weak and shadows stretched across the square, the arena floor shone. The dirt was gone. The stains faded. The air itself felt different. The janitor leaned on his broom, breathing hard, but he stood straight. The crowd was silent, their laughter gone. Even the auctioneer looked unsettled, his sneer faltering. He had expected failure, not this. The girl's chest tightened, tears slipping down her face. She had seen many cruel games in her short life, but never this. Never a man who worked not for coins, not for power, but for her freedom. The janitor lifted his head, his voice quiet but clear. "I have done your work," he said. "Now let her go." And in that moment the market was no longer laughing. It was holding its breath, waiting to see if the human's voice truly had the power to change fate. The market stood in silence, the dust settling after hours of laughter and jeers. The janitor's shoulders were heavy, his hands blistered, but the floor of the arena shone under the fading light. No one could deny what he had done. No one could laugh now. The auctioneer gripped his stick tighter, his pride stung. He had expected failure. He had wanted the crowd to laugh at the foolish human, yet the janitor had turned their mockery into awe. The crowd stared at the clean floor, their whispers sharp and uncertain. "He did it," someone muttered. "The janitor actually did it." Another voice said. The alien girl's heart pounded. She pressed her hands to her chest, tears slipping down her cheeks. She had seen men beg. She had seen others beaten, but she had never seen anyone work so hard for someone like her. She whispered softly, Why for me?" Her voice was so faint the wind almost carried it away. The auctioneer forced a laugh loud and hollow. "So you cleaned the floor," he sneered, "but do you think that makes her yours?" His eyes gleamed with malice. "Work is cheap, lives are not," the crowd murmured, some agreeing, some uneasy. The janitor lifted his head, sweat dripping, but his voice steady. "You made a bargain," he said. "I kept it, the girl comes with me." The auctioneer leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You are bold, human," he hissed. Too bold. He wanted to refuse, to crush the janitor's defiance, but the crowd was watching, their eyes no longer amused but questioning. If he broke his own word, he would lose control, so he twisted the rules instead. "Very well," he said, his smile sharp as knives. "She can leave, but only if she chooses to walk with you." "Tee," crowd gasped, whispers rising. This was dangerous. Cruel. The girl had been broken. Starved. Taught to obey. She had never been given a choice. Her silence would mean her chains. The auctioneer was certain she would not move. The janitor turned to her, his eyes soft now, not commanding, not demanding. He simply held out his hand, rough and scarred, palm open, waiting. The girl's breath caught, her legs trembling, her eyes wide. She looked at his hand, then at the crowd, their stares like knives. If she stepped forward, she would be mocked, punished, perhaps beaten. But if she stayed, she would vanish into the pits forever. Her throat tightened, she whispered inside herself, "Do I dare?" The janitor did not speak again. He only waited, patient, steady, his eyes saying what his lips did not. "You are not alone. Not anymore." The moment stretched long, the crowd leaning closer, waiting for her to collapse back into silence, the auctioneer smirking, certain of his victory. Then, with trembling legs, the girl stepped down from the stage, her bare feet touching the clean floor he had made for her. Each step slow, fragile, but real. The crowd gasped. The auctioneer's smirk faltered. She reached him, her small hand sliding into his rough palm, her fingers cold, shaking, but holding on. She whispered, barely audible, "I choose." The square erupted in noise, some shouting in anger, others in disbelief. "She chose the janitor," voices cried. The auctioneer slammed his stick on the ground, furious. His trick had failed, his control cracked. The janitor's chest rose with a deep breath, his eyes calm. He looked at the auctioneer and said quietly, "The bargain is done. The auctioneer spat on the ground, rage twisting his features. "Take her then," he snarled. "But remember this, human, she is marked. She is cursed. She will bring you nothing but trouble." His words echoed like poison, meant to break what had just been built. But the janitor only tightened his grip on her hand, not with force but with warmth. The girl looked up at him, her tears falling, and for the first time in her life, she felt something stronger than fear. Dignity. The crowd began to disperse, muttering, some disgusted, some uneasy, but a few eyes lingered, thoughtful, curious, whispers of something strange beginning to spread. A janitor stood against the market. A girl chose freedom. As they walked away, the girl stayed close to him, her body trembling with exhaustion, but her heart burning with a fragile light. She whispered softly, almost as if testing the sound of her own voice. "Why did you help me?" The janitor looked down at her, his face tired but kind. "Because no one else did," he said, his words simple, but they carried a weight heavier than any chain. The girl lowered her eyes, her lips pressing together, the words echoing in her chest. No one else had, but he had. The market behind them was still noisy, still cruel, but something had shifted. A bargain of dignity had been made, and though the world mocked it, the girl's fate had changed forever. The market faded behind them, its cruel voices still echoing in the girl's ears. The shouts, the laughter, the auctioneer's sneer, they clung to her like shadows. Yet with every step she took beside the janitor, those sounds grew fainter. The chains around her heart loosened a little. The street outside the market was cold and quiet. Tall metal towers blocked the sky. Neon lights flickered weakly. Trash and dust covered the ground. The girl's bare feet stumbled, unused to freedom. Each step felt strange, heavy, as if she expected someone to grab her back at any moment. The janitor walked beside her, his broom still on his shoulder, his step steady. He did not speak. He did not drag her forward. He simply matched her pace, slow and careful. His presence was like a wall shielding her from the eyes that still watched from the shadows. When they reached a corner, he stopped, pulling out a small cloth from his pocket. He bent down without a word and tied it around her feet. Rough shoes made from scraps. The girl stared at him wide-eyed. No one had ever bent down for her. No one had ever cared if her feet bled. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. He offered her the last piece of bread from his pouch, stale and small but warm in his hand. She hesitated, fear flashing in her eyes. Food had always come with a price, but his gaze was steady. No demand, no trap. Slowly she reached out, her thin fingers brushing his hand as she took it. She ate in silence, each bite softening the knot in her chest. When she finished, she whispered the first word she had spoken freely in years. "Why?" It was small, fragile, but real. The janitor looked at her, his face tired but calm. "Because you were hungry," he said simply. She lowered her head, her eyes wet. The answer was too plain, too human. She could not understand kindness without chains. They walked on, the night growing darker, the streets empty. The girl stayed close, her hand brushing against his arm as if afraid he might vanish. The silence between them was heavy, yet it was not cruel like the market's silence. It was gentle. It was space where fear slowly melted. At last, they reached a small, broken building at the edge of the city, the janitor's home, its roof patched with metal sheets, its door old and crooked. Inside it was simple, a bed in the corner, a small table, shelves lined with tools and scraps. Nothing of wealth, but it was warm. He gestured for her to sit. She obeyed carefully, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap, still carrying the habits of survival, he noticed, but he said nothing. Instead, he poured water into a cup and placed it before her. The girl touched the cup slowly, her fingers trembling. She looked at him, expecting him to snatch it back, expecting a command, but he only nodded once, waiting for her to drink. She raised it to her lips, the cool water sliding down her throat, her chest tightening with emotion. Such a simple thing, but it felt like a treasure. She whispered again, her voice unsteady. "You are not afraid. They will come. They will punish you." Her words carried both warning and guilt. She had seen too many lives broken because of her kind. The janitor sat on the other side of the table, his hands resting. Quietly, "I am afraid," he admitted, his voice calm, "but I am more afraid of doing nothing." His words sank deep into her, stronger than any chain. Silence filled the room, but it was a new kind of silence, not empty, but alive. She looked at him, her lips pressing together. She wanted to say, "More," but the words were buried under years of fear, so she remained quiet. Yet inside, something shifted. That night, she lay on the bed, the blanket rough but warm. The janitor slept on the floor nearby, his broom beside him. She watched him, in the dim light, his face peaceful despite the day's struggle. She wondered why he had done it, why he had spoken for her when no one else had. Her eyes burned with unshed tears, her chest heavy with a new feeling she could not name. Trust, fragile as glass, began to take root. She whispered into the dark words he could not hear. "Thank you." Her voice cracked, but her heart carried the weight of it. In the stillness, her breathing slowed, her body trembling less. For the first time in her life, she slept without chains, without fear of being dragged away. And as the night deepened, the bond between them grew, not with loud words, not with promises, but with silence. A silent bond that neither cruelty nor fear could erase. A bond that was only beginning to show its strength. The days passed slowly, yet they carried a strange warmth the girl had never known. Each morning the janitor left with his broom and tools, working long hours in the city, and each evening he returned with scraps of food, sometimes bread, sometimes a piece of fruit, always sharing half with her, never keeping the best for himself. At first she watched him silently, her eyes following his every move, waiting for the hidden cruelty that always came after kindness. But it never came. He never raised his voice. He never struck her. He never asked for anything she could not give. Little by little her shoulders loosened, her breaths grew steadier. She began to whisper words in his language, testing sounds with her soft voice. "Water," she would say, and he would nod with a small smile. "Food," she tried, and he answered gently, correcting her when she stumbled. Each word was a fragile step toward trust. One evening, as they sat by the broken window watching the city lights flicker, she whispered something new. "Why you help me?" Her voice cracked with both confusion and longing. The janitor looked at her for a long moment before replying, "Because no one else would." His words simple, but heavy. The truth carried in them pressed against her heart. Hope, a fragile thing she had long buried, began to rise in her chest. It frightened her. Hope could be broken so easily, yet she could not stop it. She found herself smiling sometimes, tiny, shy smiles that surprised even her. But outside their small shelter, the city was not silent. Whispers spread like smoke through the markets and alleys. The human janitor broke the auction rules, people muttered. He defied the masters. Others said, he took a slave for himself. Some sneered, twisting kindness into suspicion. The alien masters who ruled the market heard these whispers too. Their pride wounded, their control threatened. If one human could defy them, others might follow. They began to watch, waiting for the moment to strike. The girl sensed the change before he did. She felt eyes in the shadows, footsteps behind them when they walked through the streets. One evening, as he unlocked the door of their small home, she clutched his sleeve, her voice trembling. "They will come. They will take me back." The janitor paused, his eyes meeting hers. Fear flickered there, but only for a moment. Then he shook his head, his voice steady. "Then they will have to face me." She stared at him, stunned. No one had ever stood between her and danger. Her heart clenched, guilt rising like a wave. "You will be punished because of me," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You will lose everything." He crouched down to her height, his hand resting gently on her shoulder, his voice soft. "Then let them punish me, not you." Her tears fell harder, his words cutting through the fear that had defined her life. That night, She lay awake, listening to his breathing as he slept on the floor. The city hummed outside, filled with threats. But inside, she felt something new. Fragile but powerful. The belief that maybe she was not a burden. Maybe she was worth protecting. The next day she tried to help him, sweeping the floor with the broken broom, washing the dishes with her thin hands. At first clumsy but determined, he did not laugh at her mistakes. He only nodded with quiet pride. Each small act made her feel less like a shadow, more like a person. Yet the whispers grew louder in the streets. Children shouted after them, "There goes the human with his slave," adults sneered. "He thinks he is a hero." The girl shrank at the words, shame clawing at her chest. But the janitor only walked taller, never letting go of her hand when they walked together. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the towers, she found herself humming softly, a tune from her people long forgotten, her voice trembling at first, but then steady. The janitor listened, his face calm, his eyes warm. When she finished, he said nothing, only smiled as if telling her she was free to sing again. That smile planted something deeper inside her, not just hope, but courage. She began to believe that maybe their bond could survive the storm that was coming. Maybe his kindness was stronger than the cruelty of the market. But deep in her heart she knew the masters would not stay silent forever. Hope had returned, fragile and glowing. But so had danger, and soon the test of that fragile hope would arrive like a storm at their door. The storm arrived sooner than expected. It was evening, the sky dark with clouds. The girl was sweeping the small floor while the janitor fixed a broken lamp. When heavy fists slammed against the door, the sound shook the walls. The girl froze, her hands clutching the broom. Fear shot through her body like ice. She whispered, "They have come." Her voice trembling. The janitor set down his tools and stood, his jaw tight, his hand brushing the handle of his broom as if it were a weapon. The door burst open. Guards in black armor stormed in, their faces hidden, their boots heavy. Behind them the auctioneer stepped forward, his sneer sharp, his eyes burning with anger. "You dare defy the market, human." His voice echoed, cruel and mocking. The girl stumbled back, pressing against the wall, her chest heaving. She had known this moment would come, she had warned him. But still he stood between her and them, his body firm like a shield. The auctioneer pointed his staff at the janitor. "You stole property, you broke the law, and now you will be punished." His words rang out as the crowd gathered outside, drawn by the noise. Whispers filled the air. The janitor, the girl. It is happening. The guard seized the janitor, dragging him into the open square. The girl cried out, "No." Her voice breaking, she tried to run to him but was shoved back, her small body hitting the ground, pain shooting through her arms, yet her eyes never left him. The square filled with people, faces pressed close, eager for spectacle. The auctioneer raised his voice. "This human thought himself greater than our laws. He claimed a worthless child as his own. Let all see the price of rebellion." The janitor stood tall despite the bruises, his clothes torn, his broom knocked from his hands. But his eyes burned with quiet fire. The auctioneer snarled, "Do you deny it, human? Do you deny you stole her?" The janitor's voice rang out, steady and clear. "She is not stolen, she is not yours, she is free." His words cut through the square, silencing whispers, shocking even those who hated him. The auctioneer's face twisted with rage. He slammed his staff, sparks flaring. "You dare," he hissed, "then prove her worth before all. Prove she deserves to walk free." He gestured to the guards, who dragged the girl forward, her arms bound, her face pale. The auctioneer sneered, "Choose, human. Walk away now and save yourself, or stay and burn with her." The crowd gasped. The trap was cruel, the test impossible. If he left, she would be dragged back into the pits. If he stayed, they would both be broken. The girl shook her head, tears spilling. "Please," she whispered, "do not lose everything for me." The janitor looked at her, his eyes soft even in the fire of danger. "I cannot leave you," he said, his words low but firm. She sobbed, her heart breaking. The auctioneer raised his staff high. "Then let there be trial by fire," he declared. The guards lit torches, flames rising around the square, the heat pressing close. The crowd roared, hungry for spectacle. The girl trembled, choking on smoke. She thought of running, of surrendering to spare him, but his eyes held her, steady and unyielding. She felt her fear clash with the fragile hope he had given her. The guards pushed the janitor toward the circle of flames, the crowd jeering, but he did not stumble. He stood tall, lifting his voice once more. She is not your slave. She is not your shame. She is a life, and no fire can burn that truth away. For a moment, silence fell, his words hanging in the smoke. The girl's heart pounded, her chains heavy, yet something within her sparked courage where there had only been fear. She cried out, her voice carrying over the flames. I am not property. The crowd gasped. The girl who had always been silent now shouted, her voice breaking chains heavier than iron. The auctioneer snarled, his face dark with fury. Silence her, he ordered. But the moment had already broken. The whispers in the crowd grew, no longer mocking but questioning. She spoke. She claimed herself. The janitor's fire is spreading. The guards hesitated, their hands trembling, some stepping back. The flames flickered in the wind. The trial that was meant to break them had instead sparked something dangerous. The janitor turned, meeting the girl's tear-filled eyes, and in that moment they both understood. The trial of fire was not about burning. It was about standing. And together, they had stood. The auctioneer's grip on the crowd began to slip, his staff shaking, his authority trembling. But the night was not over, and the final choice was yet to come. The flames still crackled, sending sparks into the night sky. The square was filled with silence, not laughter, not jeers, only silence. The crowd that once mocked now stared, their eyes caught between fear and wonder. The auctioneer's face was twisted with rage, his staff glowing as he shouted, Enough. This ends now. They will burn together. His words cracked like thunder, yet his voice trembled, for he could feel the crowd slipping from his grasp. The janitor stood tall in the fire's glow, his clothes torn, his skin blistered. But his eyes clear, his voice rose strong, cutting through the smoke. She is not your slave, she is not your shadow. She is a child of her own life. You can burn me, but you cannot burn truth. The girl's heart hammered. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She pulled against her chains, her voice breaking free again. Louder this time. I choose. I am free. Her words rang out, fragile but powerful. The crowd gasped, the sound rolling through the square. No one had ever heard a slave speak choice in the market. Her voice carried more fire than the torches around them. From the edge of the crowd, an old alien elder stepped forward, his back bent, his eyes weary, his voice rough with age. I lost. My daughter here, long ago she was sold, her voice silenced forever. His hands trembled as he pointed at the auctioneer. And now this human dares what we never did. He speaks, he fights, he stands. The crowd shifted, whispers turning into murmurs, murmurs into voices. He is right. The human speaks truth. The girl chose. Their voices grew, pushing against the weight of fear. The auctioneer slammed his staff, sparks flying. Silence or you will all suffer. But his words no longer carried the same power. The firelight revealed something he had never faced before, defiance in the eyes of his own people. The guards hesitated, their grips loosening. One stepped back, then another. Their loyalty cracked. They were not ready to fight against a crowd that had found its voice. The janitor reached out, his rough hand grasping the girl's bound wrists. His strength steady, he pulled her close, whispering, Hold on. With one sharp motion, he broke the weak chain against a stone post. The metal snapping, the girl stumbled forward into his arms, her body shaking but her spirit burning bright. The crowd erupted, not in laughter, not in cruelty, but in cheers. Voices rising together. Free her! End this! No more chains! The auctioneer's face drained of color, his control shattered. The elder raised his voice again, his words strong despite his frail body. The market dies tonight and dignity is born. The guards dropped their weapons one by one, until only the auctioneer stood, his staff shaking, his threats empty. He roared in fury, "You will regret this, all of you." And then, like a shadow chased by dawn, he fled into the night, his power broken. The flames dimmed, torches falling into the dirt. The crowd surged forward, not to harm, but to surround the janitor and the girl. Their voices softer now, filled with awe. Some reached out, not to chain, but to touch, to reassure, to honor. The girl clung to the janitor's arm, her small hand, gripping his tightly, her voice trembling but clear. "You did not leave me." He looked down at her, his tired eyes gentle. "I never will." Tears ran down her cheeks, but they were no longer tears of fear. They were tears of release, of a future she had never dared to imagine. The elder stepped closer, his hand resting on the janitor's shoulder. "Human," he said softly. "Tonight you reminded us of what we forgot, that freedom is not given by markets, but claimed by courage." His eyes turned to the girl. "And you, child, you found. Your voice, never lose it again." The girl nodded, her chin trembling, her heart swelling. For the first time she felt not invisible, not unwanted, but alive. As dawn broke, the flames burned out and the crowd dispersed, but the whispers remained. Whispers that would spread through the city, through the stars, of the janitor who stood against the market, of the girl who chose freedom. Back in their small shelter, the girl sat quietly, the rough blanket around her shoulders. She watched the janitor clean the dirt from his broom, his movements steady, as if nothing had changed, yet everything had. She whispered, her voice fragile but sure, "Thank you." The words filled the room like light. The janitor looked at her, his lips curving into the smallest smile. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You walked on your own." Her heart clenched. She lowered her eyes, but her smile trembled through, soft and shy. A new beginning carved out of fire and courage. The fate that once seemed sealed in shadows had broken. Her life was no longer unwanted, no longer unsold. It was hers, and it had changed because one human spoke when no one else would. And as the sun rose over the city, the bond between them shone brighter than the light itself, a bond that would not just change two lives, but perhaps the fate of many yet to come.